limit.
Opinion.
They've lost jobs and stuff.
The budget cut.
To balance the budget.
They're going to have to resign. And they're going to have to cut taxes or at least.
For all the laws.
Your opinion matters. Hello, Carroll County, and welcome to Your Opinion Matters. I'm Lynn Malik. Reclaiming or selling our water for government revenue. How soon will it be before this becomes a commodity on the markets? Plan Maryland is still in the forefront. Down in Annapolis, Secretary Hall recently briefed the Environmental Committee. Are they satisfied with the policy? Will the payroll tax deduction policy die in the Senate in the name of Keystone Pipeline? And a Royal County coalition is on the horizon. How much will that cost the taxpayers? And will this end up being just another added expense? And finally, new energy conservation codes are on the way, and counties will have 6 months to comply. New home prices are sure to increase. Is this the way to boost the economy? Grab your cup of joe. It's time for Kitchen Talk. The panel is Dave Peliquin, Larry Helminiak, Doug Mathias, and Mike Evans. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Greetings.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think we should start off with that water thing, because I'm really thinking that we've heard for a long time Pepsi was buying a lot of the water rights just to make soda. And now it seems like our county and our municipality, Westminster, is talking about an ordinance that would allow the city to provide reclaimed wastewater for industrial firefighting uses. What do you see going on here, Mike, as a public works director, a former one?
It's a lot more complicated than one might think. You have to if you're doing it at a specific location, like a plant, there's some infrastructure that you have to develop for yourself to be able to make this work. If you're trying as a municipality or the county to distribute gray water, you have to have pipes and pumps and all the other things that make a system work. And then the plumber has to be able to get the right pipe to the right place. So it's not only in Australia, for example, they're doing a lot of work with gray water in communities. But that means that there's basically parallel pipes running to houses and separate pieces of plumbing, and the pipes that run to your toilet are different than the pipes that run to your lavatory where you have drinking water.
Okay.
So it's complicated. It's a good idea, but it has a lot of stuff to it.
Okay, well, Dave, you're an investor guy. I don't know if water's on the market now to buy, is it?
Well, most water companies or most water is done by municipalities and counties. I think maybe 5–10% of the water systems in the U.S. are owned by public companies, stocks. The biggest one would be Aqua America, which used to be the Philadelphia Waterworks company. So you can invest in water stocks. They're utilities. What's happening is I think the number is 50,000 or so, Mike, something like that, of different water companies, mostly, again, small municipal or county across the country. And the Clean Water Act and tons of regulations are making each of those very small, many of them very small outfits, grossly unable to keep up with mandated environmental changes. So companies like Aqua America, American Water Works, York Water's up there not too far away from here, will make a business of taking over or buying out. So the answer to your question is you can invest in the trend. It's been around for a while. It's slow moving.
Okay. All right, Larry, Mr. Rio, he's the director of Public Works now, and he had his staff, they did a presentation to the board, and they were looking at selling the water from the Freedom District water supply. You're over that way, right?
I'm over that way, and
are you cool with that?
It's an issue. Anytime you mention Freedom Water and Piney Run, it's like throwing a grenade into Eldersburg.
Oh, okay.
Piney Run Reservoir was built expressly to be a backup water source for South Carroll. And then they made it a recreational area. And then when they tried to install a pumping station to sell water to Eldersburg, it cost one or two of the commissioners their jobs. So it's a very touchy subject around Eldersburg.
Okay, so would you want them to sell the water to get more revenue and maybe less than your property tax, but take the water?
Well, it's an issue that has to be addressed. We on the East Coast are so accustomed to having all the water we need that we don't realize that, like in the West, the water is owned separately, and you don't have access to water that comes through your own property. With the population of the world now is 7 billion people. So we have to get to a point where we start to look at things like water differently than we always have.
Well, Doug, does that mean more regulation on water? Would the municipalities or even the county be able to do this without, MDE stepping in and go, whoa, you can't just up and sell that?
Well, their own Department of the Environment, they're the third party to everybody's water, so it would be hard to believe that the state wouldn't pick up, especially on the rulemaking side, on what they would require. But I think getting back to the cost factor, I think the cost would have to go up by what the plants would have to do to begin that process, as Mike stated, because in order to, to be able to roll that out, you're going to have to re-engineer somehow.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you have to consider also is that if you're talking about temporarily selling your excess capacity, that's one thing. The plant is designed to handle a population that isn't there yet. The capacity's there to be able to put it through the pipes. Everything's there. So if you're talking about selling the excess capacity, that's one thing. If you're talking about creating new capacity, that's something else entirely.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. And I don't know the details necessarily on that. I mean, I'm sure it's an open
But one
session.
of the things that would be important, if you're talking about selling your excess capacity to some third party, the water and sewer user rates for the utility enterprise fund customers should go down.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's right.
Not the general fund.
That's right. But
Okay.
the people that are buying that
Exactly.
sewer
They're
water.
the owners of all the water. They have to pay for all that plant, whether it's being fully used or
So
not.
we need a cost analysis,
Yes.
Cost-benefit analysis, that's right.
cost-benefit analysis,
Yes.
and then we would be able to know whether it
Think
was
of
the
gray
right
water similar to desalination of ocean water, which Australia also messes around with, because if you look at there's one of your notes to us that is water the new gold. Well, water has been kind of a spotlight type item for maybe 10 years in the investment arena, only because you have electric companies, you have energy pipeline companies, and you have water companies. They're all necessities. They all typically pay decent dividends, and
Well, one of the axioms in water is that all the water that ever was is.
Yeah.
Okay? So
Okay.
it gets used and reused.
Okay.
It comes back in rain and air and all kinds of
Yep, and
things.
through our storm water, and
Goes
out
you
the
know,
ground,
pretty
yeah.
soon we're going to be putting sludge on the fields, and we're going to be like living in our
Been doing that for years.
I know, and that's another subject. We are going to move on to Plan Maryland because I want to get this covered. I went to Annapolis for the first time on Monday, viewers. It was an eye-opener. Mr. Helminiak took me down there so that I could see how it worked. No comment. But what was going on there, the Secretary Hall was briefing the Environmental and Education Committee on, the policy and giving them what it's supposed to be. Larry, it was a crowded room, some standing room only.
Yes.
So you think this is done deal?
I think it's a done deal. Our governor intends to run for president in 2016. There's no secret about that. And he wants to make sure when he does that he's been on the side of the environmentalists and the slow growth or planned growth people, and that's what Plan Maryland is all about.
Doug, 2016, you think that's it?
Well,
Is that what you're hearing?
I'm not sure about his political future, but I think certainly Plan Maryland is almost a done deal. And I think Annapolis is very pleased with itself. I think it will have a detriment in a lot of the counties, including probably Carroll. And I think the politics of how they're doing this issue as public policy has been very dangerous. And I think if they keep going this way, it's really going to feed into the national interest in the election next year, where people feel that they have really lost control, especially when you discuss the topic, which you really have no control over it. And it's pretty frustrating as it plays to politics and its political interest.
Oh, so you're saying that it'll play into the presidential election as far as people not being heard.
Right. I think it
And-
plays into the fact, well, why did you ask us if you were going to do it anyway?
Oh,
And I
okay.
think
Yeah.
there's a lot of that this is just going to feed on top of the national debate now.
I
My-
think it goes way beyond Maryland, because a friend of mine just came back a couple days ago from a trip to Chile. And in Chile, all over the place, they're building 20 and 40-story high-rises to move people into. I went on a trip to Copenhagen 2 years ago, same thing. Everybody lives in high buildings and rides bicycles. That's the plan for the world, and Plan Maryland is just a microcosm of that.
Well, I got to ask somebody answer this, because China is going to become a consumer nation. Because everyone over in China sees Americans and says, I want to have the car, I want to have this, I want to have that. So if you don't try to plan your square miles, and China, you know, what's this all mean?
You know, again, I'm a market-oriented kind of guy, you know, and that's, I bristle when I hear planning and central planning, and you need to organize people, and you need to, you know, map out and all that. And I say, you need to do some healthy regulations so you don't get hither and yon, and we don't have that. I mean, in other words, we have, and I look at Carroll County as pretty much a good example of it. There was a county department of planning before most other counties in the country back in 1960 or 61. So Carroll County has 8 towns, and if you think about it, even I've lived in Carroll 25 years, the growth has come around the towns. Why do we then need, in our county, just using Carroll County, why do we need people we've never met in Annapolis meeting, passing a policy that will tell owners, landowners here in Maryland, in Carroll County, who've owned farms and owned land and owned property decades and decades and decades, you're this color, or this color, here's what the planning is going to do for you the rest of your life.
I hear what you're saying, but Mike, they've already, since 1997, had priority funding areas, PFA areas. Schools have not necessarily always been built in those PFAs, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. So there has been some leniency there on certain things.
I think the whole concept of the planned service areas that they have, the PFAs, has more to do with population growth than infrastructure development. Schools go where the students are, where you have fewer miles to travel by bus, and a whole bunch of other considerations go into the development of a school. Schools have to serve 100% of the population, whether they're in the community planning areas or not. But it has much more to do with where the growth will likely develop, and there the focus is definitely around the towns. In very closely designated areas, which almost force you to go to vertical. In Carroll County, show me where the 5-story building is.
Right, that's right.
Okay.
Show me where the
Yeah, but I'll
3-story
show you
building
where the
is.
ag preservation is. So they're really getting their way anyway. Because if they get 100,000 acres of ag preservation in this county, they got 30% of the land mass is locked up and can't be built on anyway. My concern is forward thinking. Now, you know, we're about 10,000 people growth every 10 years. So let's go 50 years out. That's another 50,000, you know, 50% more, or is that right?
No, but that's close. I mean, it's 10,000. I know. I mean,
But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
I do.
okay, now forward thinking, my grandchild can't afford to have a house here because the cost is going to be so high because everything's locked up in non-development. They're going to be stuck with buying my house that'll be
do you think the market
70
left
years
to its
old.
own devices would let that happen? I would say not. I
How are they
would
going to
say
get
it's
out
all
of
the-
a perpetuality situation?
Carroll County's been growing by 25 to 27,000 per decade for 40 years, okay? It's growing slower than that now. So if we grow by 25,000 per decade, that's 2,500 people per year. That's about, you know, you can do the math, average household's 3 people. It's not Armageddon. It works out to 1.5% a year. And I've done the math, written letter to the editor, and I'm not trying to say I'm an authority, but we don't have rampant growth in Carroll. We just do not.
But we have
so
the
we
ag
don't need the state,
preservation,
but we don't need the
so-
state coming down on us like we're the bad kid that can't control our growth and can't decide where things go. I'm not a builder. I don't own a farm. I just look at what is. And
Remember, though, that what the state planning people want you to do is they want you to live in a community where you have small lots, where you have public water and public sewer.
Smart growth.
right.
Smart growth, exactly. And the whole concept is to, what they call densification, packing more people in a smaller area.
And we're giving it to them.
Now, I live on a 3-acre lot. There's not going to be a lot of 3-acre lots out there. They are the ones that are being preserved from ag preservation. If you go to the ag preservation areas, they don't have water, they don't have sewer. They're large tracts of land.
Okay, all right. Well, Larry, do you have any last minute
Just
before I
last
move on?
minute, I think numbers explain everything. 1950, Baltimore was the 6th largest city in the country, had 960,000 people, and it was half of Maryland. Now it's around 600,000 people and 47,000 empty houses. They want the people from Maryland to move back to Baltimore.
There you go. Simple as that.
Densification.
Right.
Intensification.
Don't like sprawl. So
right.
If
Sprawl
they
like
keep if they
sprawl.
keep winning the buying the development rights, they might just get everybody
Well,
moving back into the city.
they
That's
have the
one,
power.
you know.
They have the power.
All right. Well, we got this payroll tax deduction that the Obama administration and Reid pretty much said that the Senate's not going to sign it. The House has already passed it because there's a concession in there that that Keystone pipeline be permitted. So
Huge
what's the
mistake
thoughts?
not to do Keystone, just huge mistake. By the way, if you followed Prime Minister Harper from Canada, they have no qualms taking that pipeline and just going whoop over to Seattle,
China.
over to that part of and giving it
So-
to Japan, who would love to have it because why? Nuclear just took a hit. and they
Okay,
need-
let's separate it out. Are you for the payroll tax cut?
But I'm not for. I think the payroll tax cut should be stopped. In other words,
Oh, don't have that $10
we've got a
going
Social
everybody a
Security.
week.
You're going to give everybody $25 a week is what you're going to do, or keep giving them $25 a week. I know we're all hurting. It's a tough economy. What happens if they keep extending this? It'll never come back. And
Larry?
we already have a Social Security system that's not very healthy.
I'm against the cut. We had Al Gore saying that the Social Security should be in a lockbox. What this did, that's the only funding for Social Security, and they cut a third of it.
Right.
And it's going to have to be paid
Somewhere.
sometime.
Yeah.
Doug?
I as well, I'm against
Wow.
it because they're basically defunding the only funding mechanism for Social Security. And then telling you somehow you can have that money to take home and pay higher taxes by moving the money to payroll taxes. The whole thing's rather phony. People would rather have their Social Security funded, so when they go to collect, it's going to be there.
Mike?
We talk about our kids not being able to afford to ever retire because of the Social Security system, then we're taking away the money that they would be going into the account that would help our kids be able to retire. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't.
It's $20 a week because the average person, the
Yeah.
average household makes $50,000. It's
Well,
2%.
You talked about the pipeline. You start talking about the pipeline. When the Republicans put that in there, that put Obama in a real box. On the one hand, you got the environmentalists don't want the pipeline. The unions do, and they're both in the Obama camp. So the way he dealt with it was he didn't say no pipeline.
Just delay it.
No pipeline till after the 2012 election.
Right. I think some of the estimates go as high as just jobs on the pipeline, 100,000. That doesn't count all the ancillary jobs that come from that. Look at North Dakota. I challenge any viewer, Google North Dakota boom. And just if you don't know what's going on there, 3.5% unemployment. They've got man villages. They call them man towns because it's like the gold rush.
Like Alaskan
pipelines being
pipeline.
built. It's exactly like
Yeah.
that. And nobody even knows about it, but North Dakotans do.
All right.
And I imagine the surrounding states where a lot of young men and women are going to work.
Well, you know what I do want to point out to the viewers, those Bush tax cuts are going to be expiring, and no one's talking about those. And when you go to file your income tax next year and you can't write off $4,000 worth of IRA deduction, you didn't pay attention.
Right.
That's what they're kind of keeping that quiet. The Energy Conservation Code that's coming up, wake up, it is a-coming. January 1, 2012, the state adopts it. We follow within 6 months. It's COMAR. It's law. We have no choice. We have insulation values that are going to go up Mike and I talked about this. You make insulation thicker. Up now you got to have a bigger wall, bigger window framing. You came from Carroll Insulation, so you know a lot about insulation just in that cost factor. Did you do a little cost analysis for me?
I got to tell you more what
Yeah,
it's
good.
about.
Yep.
What all this is about is new energy versus old energy. Old energy is cheaper to sell than new energy. What I mean by that is power plants. You got to think power plants. We haven't built an atomic energy plant in 30 years.
Yep, more.
So we have a growing population, bigger houses, more demand, more electricity being asked for, and the same plants. One of the main reasons that drives this is they don't want to build more energy plants, so they have to make every home more energy efficient. That's what drives it. Now, does it drive the cost of the house up? Yes, but one of the things, and I was in this all my life, since 1958, insulation doesn't cost money, it saves money. If you were to double the insulation in your house and put the cost of, say, $2,000 on your 30-year mortgage, you would actually be able to pay your mortgage times 2, or pay that amount of money with the savings from the gas electric company. So I'm never against adding more insulation till it gets to a certain point.
Airtight.
Well,
That's what this
airtight, you're talking
blower
about.
stuff's about.
Yeah, you're talking about blower door test is the
That's right.
proper name, and it's air changes per hour.
Yep.
And ideal is like 2.6, 2.7 air changes per hour. What's contradictory is the counties all now have codes where you have to go in with caulking guns and seal all the cracks to make sure air doesn't come in, and then they make the house so tight that you need an air exchanger
Ventilator.
to ventilate it.
Right.
One of the biggest problems, and people have to get rid of this, one of the biggest things that causes a problem is, I refer to them as hi-hats, recessed ceiling lights. Everybody likes these, they're neat to have the ceiling lights in your ceiling, but you might as well not insulate the house because they're just little chimneys that suck.
Do you have them in yours?
Now you tell me. Sure, I built them in.
So are you building a new house in the next year? or-
No. I
You
wouldn't
know.
build them in again after
Well, I
hearing
just
that
want builders
description.
to know.
Right.
Do you think they're aware of this? And
No. Well, they're probably getting more aware, but I don't think they have an easy time keeping up with government. And I think you're always running behind government, and I think that's one of the problems in business.
They know what they're doing. That's why. The government knows better than
Well,
private
I mean, you're going to have to
companies.
put a ventilator system in because the blower door test can't exceed 3 by code, and the equipment says if it's 5 or less, you got to have a ventilator and to exchange that air because it can only, so right there it's contradicting.
Right.
If you think of a house much like your own breathing apparatus, if you're so plugged up that you can't breathe through your nose, you're going to breathe through your mouth, right?
Right.
It's the same concept. You have to be able to exchange the air. You can't just keep reusing it.
A side factor is the condensation buildup, because if you don't move the air, I've been in houses
dry rot.
that were so tight that you could put your hand on the wall and your handprint would be on the wall. You make a house too tight with too few air changes per hour, and you're going to have mold buildup,
Right.
condensation on the walls.
Legionnaires' disease in
Legionnaires.
the 70s. I talked to the
Yeah.
code administrator about this, thinking, well, maybe we can say we adopt it, but we don't enforce it for 5-10 years. And he goes, ma'am, that is COMAR. That is law.
Yeah.
That and the ADA you cannot touch.
Yeah. Well, back in the
American Disability
back,
Act.
back in the late 70s, when we first started the energy conservation effort in code, they built houses that were so tight that they literally dry rotted.
Wow.
And of course, then you have structural issues and all kinds of things with dry rot.
Well, there are other factors that play into it that you can't put into a code, or it's too complicated to put in code. Like, where is the house? There's the leeward side of a hill and the windward side of a hill. If you have a house, I've had situations where they had ventilation problems in one house, but 2 doors away, exactly the same house, no ventilation problems. The reason was they were on a cul-de-sac and faced a different direction. If a house faced north, you're going to get plenty of wind, but if a house faced east, then the same house, same exact type house, doesn't get any wind and the attic ventilation doesn't work. So all those things.
Does it help on a mild day to
If you're on
crack
a,
your
if you're
window
on a
open?
wooded lot, you don't have any wind against the house working the static ventilators.
Yeah.
If you're not on a wooded lot, then it works well.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, builder beware. Start figuring it out in your contract so that you're covered and you're informed. Lastly, the Rural County Coalition is forming. And what does this mean to John Q. Citizen? There is a news release from the county government that indicated that, you know, they're starting this coalition, and I think they have 3 counties right now.
I think 4.
Is it 4 now?
Yeah, it's the western counties.
I just want to get feedback on this. If you think it's going to be an effort that gets anywhere, Doug, what do you think?
I think it's probably not going to have many benefits in the long run. It's great to say we're going to have these discussions and we're going to, you know, try to do things similar to other counties, but I think our counties are, I think there's a different thing going on in Annapolis, and all the counties in Maryland are already in the same organization called the Maryland Association of Counties. And I used to work with that, MACO.
Right.
And they represent everybody and they testify on everybody's bills. But even they pointed out earlier this year on the Plan Maryland that when counties start going outside of that structure, because they're welcomed in Annapolis and inside the committee rooms, and they're listened to. I mean, they testify on all their bills. MACO does, and they're very qualified to do that. When you're getting another system set up, you're part of one, but you're not using them well, and you're moving to these other ones, that never works very well in Annapolis.
Mike, history. I think you know a little bit about history, and I just remember kind of sort of that Manchester didn't want to be part of Carroll, and or maybe it was Union Mills didn't want to be part of Carroll. I'm going back to the 1800s, and is this kind of like history repeating itself, really?
Well, to a certain extent. I think anytime you have groups that form coalitions, they will be politely listened to in Annapolis.
Okay.
But I think what Doug is saying is politely listened to as opposed to listened to. There's a significant difference. And if the reality is that the people in Annapolis go by votes, and Montgomery, not a rural county, Prince George's, not a rural county, Baltimore City, between those 3, they determine the results of the elections in Maryland. All of the rest of us, we're important. We represent a huge landmass and all of the scenery and stuff like that, but the reality is that they don't get listened to as eloquently as these big counties.
Is that what you're
I don't
agreeing?
come from knowing much about MACO, but I would say that apparently the leaders of 4 counties, ours, Frederick, Allegheny, and I think it's Frederick, Washington, Frederick, Allegheny, and Carroll. Obviously, those groups of commissioners believe that MACO, sure, it coalesces and groups together all the 23 counties, but we're not being listened to well.
Not
Okay.
as
And
not
I
as-
would
not
agree
as
that
well.
it might not be real effective at first to group, but I would say I like it.
All right, Larry, Commissioner Frazier was against the lobbyist. She was to have a voice herself through her delegates. Now we're looking at this. Is it just another step? We got a lobbyist, we got this organization, and we've got our delegates. Are we big enough? 18 counties? If we get 18 counties to join this, we're 4 now?
There is a solution that has nothing to do with what anyone has said.
Okay.
Washington, D.C., every once in a while, every 10 or 20 years, wants to be their own state.
Oh, yeah.
My opinion is the next time they ask, instead of fighting it, say, sure, providing that you take Montgomery County and Prince George's County with you, form the state of Columbia, and then we'll have all the counties that think alike except Baltimore City, and the problem will be solved.
I like it.
Hey, there's an idea. And that's all we have for now. Thank you, guys. We got a teleprompter issue. If you would like to comment on Kitchen Talk, it was me, please email me at c3yom@comcast.net. Until next time, I'm Lynn Malik, and remember, your opinion matters.